So even though this new Congress has just begun, will it be better or worse than the one who has served for the last 2 years? Well, Rasmussen reports asked that question to Americans. They found that Americans are slightly more optimistic this time around. 37% believe this new Congress will be better. 31% believe it will be worse. 22% said it'll be about the same. And 10% weren't sure. When Rasmussen asked which would be better for the country, 52% said if President Biden does more of what Congress wants, 33% if Congress does more of what President Biden wants, and 16% said they're not sure. So let's bring in the head pollster of Rasmussen Reports, Mark Mitchell. Mark, it sounds like Americans are slightly optimistic this time around, and I looked through some of your other crosstabs and questions, and I particularly was also interested in the speaker's race and how people felt about it. So do you think that the shakeup and some dynamic that we saw last week is helping people feel like, well, things might be a little bit different? We might see some better issues or better, effort out of Congress?
There's a couple of things to look at. First, if you look at the 6-point edge there, that's actually a pretty big edge, especially when you think that probably if we did a Biden-Trump rematch today, Trump would maybe potentially only win by a few points. So if I'd asked that question a year ago, Trump would have won by 16 points, but that lead is chipped away as Trump has been out of the picture and Biden has, he's been in office and a lot of bad things are happening, but he isn't necessarily getting the blame. So that 6-point edge there is really important, but then there's a 22% people that will just punch out and say, well, it's about the same. But I think the real story here is looking into the party demographics and seeing the spread among Democrats and Republicans. And I think that really tells you what the story is. So for Democrats, there's 24% of Democrats that actually think the incoming Republican Congress is going to be better than what they had in the last year. Now, it's impossible to say if that is because of the things they saw with the McCarthy, speakership vote. Working in public opinion and sort of less of the opinion that stuff really percolates to the voters in a really rapid way, enough to have a massive impact, like maybe a few points. But, only 48% of Democrats say that this Republican Congress is going to be worse than the one that's incredible. Now, the Republicans, you'd think, all right, well, Republicans have Congress, all this stuff happened. They have this rules package they want. Only 58% of Republicans that say that this Congress is going to be better. And that number is higher than the Democrats by 10 points, but still seems really low to me. And 15% of Republicans say worse. So that's way better than Democrats. But I think there's this overarching aspect that people just really don't like Congress. Congress has very low favorabilities compared to really anybody else. We talked a little bit earlier about how Congress's favorability is sort of up over this year, and that's a new thing. We actually polled a lot about the speakership as well, and especially among Republicans, only 48% of Republicans wanted to keep McCarthy, but there was only a number, I believe it was 29, who were against him. So now looking at what happened, there wasn't, McCarthy's just got sort of middling ratings among Republicans. He doesn't do nearly as well as Trump. Trump's 20 points higher than McCarthy at least. But he does way better than McConnell. McConnell's at really low, like low 30s with Republicans. So he's just sort of in the middle. And I think part of it is Republicans are seeing all this talk in the pundit class about how this is an embarrassment, it's to disrupt Congress, and why are we doing this? And not necessarily all of the positive aspects that we obviously know from watching Matt Gaetz. So there was, I think, a lot of just confusion about that. And I think stepping back and looking at it, Trump assembled a massive voting base in 2020, the biggest a Republican ever had. And I think people say, well, that's MAGA. And I disagree. I think a large portion of it was MAGA. I think a large portion of it was establishment Republicans and neocon types. And I think a really good chunk of it was independents and Democrats that were swayed over. But what happened in 2020 is he lost. And a lot of those people have been looking in other directions. And they're not on Truth Social. And they're not seeing the MAGA message. And I don't think they're necessarily seeing the MAGA message from Republicans. In fact, I think it's fair to say that Republicans have been very quiet these last 2 years. And even Republicans in Senate have been crossing the aisle to give wins to the Democrats. I think the real big question is, like, looking at Republicans and looking at the speakership. Republicans don't want a leader in Congress that only half of them want him to be there, right? Like, shouldn't that spread be bigger? And then the Democrats, the spread, not that many Democrats. A good portion of Democrats wanted McCarthy's speaker. So the spread between Democrats wanting him and not wanting him was only, 20 points, different than Republicans. And I think a Republican potentially would want a bigger spread there, with 90% of Democrats not wanting this guy and 10% wanting this guy, after the divisiveness that we've seen over the last 2 years.
And I was very surprised at the very aggressive pro-McCarthy campaign. Most Americans didn't get to hear anything except for that it had to be Kevin McCarthy, and that, this was bad for people to question it. So for his numbers to still be that low is surprising, because he sure had the cheerleaders out there. Before we run out of time, and I love the speaker poll. I wish we could talk about it all day. So I recommend people go to your YouTube, where I know you're going to break it down even more. But I also want to hit immigration, since Biden finally made his way to the border, but it was a very controlled PR situation, as we know. Talk about what we found on immigration in your latest poll.
Well, you're showing Biden ratings on immigration, and I'd have to say that this ranks close to economy as his lowest issue. And these numbers are actually worse than the last time we asked it in June. So that's a combined 30% excellent and good. What we were on talking about Ukraine, and Biden does in the 40s with excellent and good, and only 30, I think it was 38 or 39% poor. Here he's 51% poor. So that's a few points worse than June. And it's important to note that his approval is up 7 or 8 points since then. So, those two things are moving in opposite directions. So now the party numbers are horrifying for Republicans and independents. He's got an 11-point and a 21-point combined excellent and good. But he has a 57 points combined excellent and good with Democrats. Now, that's a really fascinating lesson potentially in his supporters. If you look at people who strongly approve of Biden, 34% give him an excellent in the issue of immigration. Nobody else gives him above a 4%. So somewhat disapproves, they give him a 4%. Somewhat approves of Biden, only give him a 3% excellent. So it's really those, like, riding with Biden people that are moving all the numbers here. He's got like a combined 91% excellent, good, and fair with those people. But what's interesting is Democrats aren't necessarily totally for legal immigration. We asked in our exit polling in November, do you favor policies that prevent illegal immigration or policies that favor immigration? Only 37% of Democrats say they favor policies that favor illegal immigration. And so, with the vast plurality of Democrats against illegal immigration, he's still getting a 57% combined excellent and good on that issue. And his strong approved people, we asked another question: is the current situation with the immigrants at the U.S.-Mexican border a crisis? 69% of voters say yes, 19% say no. But the people that strongly approve of Biden, only 43% say yes. So half of them think it's a crisis, but half of them, 38%, don't. So a good chunk of Biden strongly approve, don't think the issue at the border is a crisis. The people that do think it's an issue don't attribute it to Biden, or really just frankly don't care, or they like legal immigration and they think he's doing a good job.
I think a lot of that comes down to the media narratives as well, and that's kind of hard to factor into your polling, But I always love seeing the numbers. It's always very interesting and telling, and we appreciate you being here, Mark Mitchell with Rasmussen. And again, go find him on YouTube, because he goes in more into detail, and it's really good.
Yep. Love to have you guys on our YouTube channel. Thanks for having me, Emerald.